What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Friday, September 17th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Oh, and good news, guys. Make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. Okay, guys, we have a 15-game slate tonight. So let's take a look at the pitcher position. I like Zach Wheeler pitching against the New York Mets. So Zach Wheeler is only giving up a .615 OPS versus righties and a .532 OPS versus switch hitters. And he's facing 5 righties and 2 switch hitters here tonight. On top of that, the Mets have only hit 23 of his last 113 pitches. That's a .204 batting average. Zach Wheeler is $10,700 FanDuel salary, 100 less on DraftKings, projected at 30.8 fantasy points here tonight. He has an ERA of 2.86. His record is 13-9 on the season, pitching an average of 97 pitches per game, averaging 41 fantasy points per game, and he scored 51, 55, and 24 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a low-scoring game. 7.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Zach Wheeler here versus the New York Mets. Now, if you want to save some salary at the pitcher position, always high risk, high reward when you decide to do that. But take a look at Adrian Hauser with a 7% pitching advantage over a low salary batting team, the Chicago Cubs. Adrian Hauser pitches his best ball versus righty batters, only giving up a .584 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 5 righties here tonight. Now, this is a small sample size, but the Cubs have hit 9 out of his last 26 pitches, so that's a .346 batting average. Not a great start, but the splits are good here. And Adrian Hauser is $8,400 FanDuel salary, $1,300 less on DraftKings, so I like that DraftKings price. And he has an ERA of 3.25. His record is 9-6 on the season, pitching an average of 84 pitches per game, averaging 25 fantasy points per game. He scored 43, 58, and 12 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Adrian Hauser here versus the Chicago Cubs. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like CJ Cron with a 23% batting advantage over Josiah Gray. CJ Cron bats 16% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .923 OPS versus righties, and Josiah Gray is giving up a .907 OPS versus righties. Now, CJ Cron is 0 for 1 versus Gray, and he's $3,300 FanDuel salary, 1,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 3, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I think he's due for a good game here. So I like CJ Cron here versus Josiah Gray. So here's a value play. I like Ji-Man Choi with a 74% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Casey Mize. Ji-Man Choi is batting 39% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .818 OPS versus righties. And Casey Mize, he pitches his worst ball by far to switch hitters. 35% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .110 OPS versus switch hitters. Now, Ji-Man Choi is 0 for 1 versus Mize, but he's only 2,500 FanDuel salary, 1,600 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 25, 0, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Ji-Man Choi here versus Casey Mize.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Adam Frazier. So here's another value play. Adam Frazier he has a 25% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Miles Mikolas. Adam Frazier bats 9% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .727 OPS versus righties. And Miles Mikolas, he pitches his worst ball versus lefty batters, 16% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .876 OPS versus lefties. Now I like this pick because Adam Frazier is 12 for 32, batting a .375 batting average, and a 1.019 OPS versus Mikolas. And he's only 2,500 FanDuel salary and only 700 more on DraftKings. So I love that price on both sites. Projected at 9.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 21, 25, and 6 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Adam Frazier here versus Miles Mikolas. Another value play. I like David Fletcher with a 9% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Cole Irvin. David Fletcher is batting 24% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .859 OPS versus lefties. And Cole Irvin, he's giving up a 1.089 OPS versus righties. And I like this pick because David Fletcher is 5 for 9, batting a .556 batting average and a 1.414 OPS versus Irving. So David Fletcher is only 2,600 FanDuel salary, 1,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 9, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like David Fletcher here versus Cole Irvin. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Jeimer Candelario with an 18% batting advantage over Luis Patino. Jeimer Candelario is batting a .805 OPS versus righty pitchers, and Luis Patino, he pitches his worst ball versus switch hitters, 32% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.112 OPS versus switch hitters. Jeimer Candelario is 1 for 2 with a 2.5 OPS versus Patino because that one hit is for a home run. He's 3,400 FanDuel salary, 1,200 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 19, 0, and 6 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Jeimer Candelario here versus Luis Patino. I also like Colin Moran, another value play, with a 41% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Elieser Hernandez. Colin Moran is batting 23% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .813 OPS versus righties, and Elieser Hernandez, he's pitching 18% worse to lefties as he does righties, giving up a .805 OPS versus lefties. So Colin Moran is 2 for 3 with a 2 OPS versus Hernandez, and he's only 2,600 FanDuel salary, He's 1,400 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 8 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 7, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So a lot of these picks, I think they're just due for big games in good matchups and low salary. So I like Colin Moran here versus Elieser Hernandez. Okay, who do we have at the shortstop position? I like Fernando Tatis Jr. batting against a low salary pitcher, Miles Mikolas. Fernando Tatis Jr., he's batting 17% better versus righty pitchers, batting a 1.011 OPS versus righties. And Miles Mikolas, he's giving up a .735 OPS versus righties. Now, Tatis Jr. is 1 for 3 versus Mikolas, and he's 4,300 FanDuel salary, 1,400 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 15 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 28, 21, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Fernando Tatis Jr. here versus Miles Mikolas.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now one of my favorite plays on the slate and one of my favorite players in baseball, I like Xander Bogaerts with a 22% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Keegan Aiken. Xander Bogaerts bats 9% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .929 OPS versus lefties. And Keegan Aiken, he's pitching 13% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .813 OPS versus righties. So Xander Bogaerts is 2 for 4 with a 1.1 OPS versus Aiken. He's 3,700 FanDuel salary, 1,100 more on DraftKings, projected at 13.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 18, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Xander Bogaerts here versus Keegan Aiken. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I like JD Martinez with an 8% batting advantage over that low salary pitcher, Keegan Aiken. JD Martinez is batting a .743 OPS versus lefties, and Keegan Aiken is giving up a .813 OPS versus righties. JD Martinez is 1 for 3 with a 1.833 OPS versus Aiken, because that one hit was for a home run. He's 3,900 FanDuel salary, 700 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 10, 25, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like JD Martinez here versus Keegan Aiken. I also like George Springer, batting against the low salary pitcher, Michael Pineda. George Springer is batting 7% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .903 OPS versus righties. And Michael Pineda, he's giving up a .589 OPS versus righties. But the reason I like this pick is because George Springer is 10 for 22, batting a .455 batting average and a 1.478 OPS versus Pineda. 3 of those 10 hits are for home runs. And he's 3,900 FanDuel salary, 1,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 13 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 6, and 3 fantasy points in his last 3 games, so I think he's due for a big game here tonight. So I like George Springer here versus Michael Pineda. I also like Franmil Reyes with a 56% batting advantage over Corey Kluber. Franmil Reyes is batting 12% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .853 OPS versus righties, and Corey Kluber, he's pitching his worst ball by far to righty batters, 44% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .932 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Kluber yet, and Franmil Reyes is $3,400 FanDuel salary, $1,900 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 12 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 31, 0, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Franmil Reyes here versus Corey Kluber. I also like Brian Reynolds with a 36% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Alicia Hernandez. Brian Reynolds is batting a .757 OPS versus righties, and Alicia Hernandez, he pitches his worst ball by far to switch hitters, 38% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.174 OPS versus switch hitters. Brian Reynolds is 3 for 4 with a 3 OPS versus Hernandez because 2 of those 3 hits are for home runs. And he's only $3,000 FanDuel salary. He's $1,900 more on DraftKings, so I love that FanDuel price. Projected at 10.5 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 22, and 12 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So I like Brian Reynolds here versus Alicia Hernandez.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.